one of the most heartbreaking conversations I have is always the first health history, and how often a new patient will tell me before we get into the labs, before we really get into, what's going on, so many of my patients just need me to know that they're not lazy.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the First Optimal podcast. Really excited. We have Dr. Mariza, say it like Teresa, right? She just coached me on that, make sure I didn't botch the name, but appreciate you joining us. Really excited to have her on today. So she is a women's health expert, practitioner as well, out of San Diego, but does a lot. We were talking a little bit on doing telehealth as well, and then author of the book, the Perimenopause Revolution. So excited to talk about that. Got some different perimenopause guides and a lot of great resources. So I started following your content a couple months ago, and just, it was a combination of a few things. So we'll get into all the details of where to find her, but just really impressed with the educational content, as well as some of the podcast, as well, like listening to the conversations and the clips were just, really good nuggets of information. So excited to have you on. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I loved our pre-conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So for everyone who doesn't know, we were doing a little pre-chat, and we were just talking about a little women's health. For those who've been tuning in for a while know, I have my wife, Amber, who is the 2%er, the 2% symptoms. So she's the one that struggles a little bit with kind of some transitions, but it's a blessing in disguise because it's helped us not only find solutions for her, but help a lot of other women and just kind of explore that information. And then we were talking about my two daughters. So that the first is going through some onboarding into womanhood, which has been exciting for dad. So it's good to chat about those things. So
a lot of estrogen in the household. So.
Yes. The youngest isn't quite there yet. When it comes, so I will say every fall, like I'm very fortunate, not only every fall, but every day now, but in the fall, for the 5th year now, I volunteer locally, coach a football team here. And every year I'm like, feel bad, like away from family time, like, we're so busy now. Every year now, it used to be my wife. She's like, no, you need to get that boy stuff out, like go. And now, like, literally my daughters and my wife are like standing at the door. I don't think girls, we're busy. Like, you sure? They're like, they just point, like, you need to go do the boy thing, like get out of here. So I'm like, all right, cool. That works. So
awesome. I love that.
Yeah, they support me well, and keep me in line. They take good care of me, so I can't complain for sure. And I do my best to reciprocate, but who knows? I mean, my oldest might be a little scarred for life, because how like men, right, our zippers and buttons are in the front of our shirts. Well, when I was taking my daughter to the child center at where I worked in a health club industry for a while, and I had to get her dressed because it was, of course, a dad should be able to get her daughter dressed. And so dads out there, like, it's not a good excuse. But the buttons were in the front. The dress was on backwards. So, and the child center worker was like, "Oh, Dad, I'm like, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "No, she's all done up. She's ready to go." Nope. I was like, I thought that looked kind of funny. So trial by error. I've learned quite a bit, and girl dad all the way, wouldn't have it any other way. So it's good times. But anyways, so let's get into some of this fun stuff here today. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about your journey originally, because I'm always just curious to kick things off, and I could bounce around to so many stuff to really just dive into, but I think it's kind of nice for the audience to level set as far as, your credentials, your education, a little bit about your journey. Like, clearly, there's a lot of knowledge and commitment to get to where you are now with your education and writing a book, and a lot of the medical, services you're providing. But I think also, there's got to be some passion behind it to kind of really put that extra touch on everything that you're doing, which clearly comes through in a lot of your education, your content, and resources. So can you tell us a little bit about why you do what you do and how did you get here?
Yeah, I love this question. And I'll start because I feel like, as a woman, there's so many hormone transitions that we get to go through. And my mom had me at a very young age. She was 19 years old, and she's 65 today, and she is kicking butt, taking names. She just sent me her full biomarker panel, her lab panel, and it was a chef's kiss. Like, she called me yesterday from tennis, playing competitive tennis. I love it. She's
Nice.
who I'm looking up to. But when I entered my practice back in 2008, 2009, my mom she was 48 years old. And she had been a single mom my entire life. This woman was a freight train. She was unstoppable. That's how I knew my mom. Like, she had this power walk. You think of the 80s and the 90s. She had like the pencil kind of, suits. And she would, her keys would be jingling, and she would have her heels on when she would be picking us up from after school. Like, we knew that noise. This woman was going somewhere all the time. She was always going somewhere. And she had been in perimenopause at the time. And again, I knew about menopause. And I knew that it was a time where hormones were coming offline, that ovarian senescence, like I knew but I didn't really understand the transition of peri until my mom went through it. At the time, I had a lot of patients in my practice that had migraines. And because I had migraines since I was a little girl. So it was no surprise that I attracted a lot of migraine patients. And lo and behold, a lot of the women who had migraines in my practice were women in midlife. That this massive neuroendocrine transition. We see more neuroinflammation due to hormones rapidly fluctuating and declining. And so I just happened to have women in my practice that were also in perimenopause and even early menopause. And they were being siloed into multiple directions. They had a cardiologist, they had an endocrinologist, they had orthopedics for their frozen shoulder. I mean, they had all the symptoms that perimenopause presents. They were in multiple different disciplines. And at the time, my mom became a shell of her former self. Like, she didn't recognize herself anymore. She was having severe mood changes, rage. She was having severe depression, weight gain, sleep issues. I mean, a lot of the classic perimenopausal symptoms, but she didn't even know who she was anymore. And I had the opportunity to step in and take care of my mother at that time because I was scared. She was scared. I was scared for her. I'd never seen my mom, this version of her. And it was such a beautiful experience to get to take care of her. But I remember thinking two things at the time. One, like, we are failing women at every corner here. Like, there are so many things that we're not getting right. And women are just being micromanaged or really kind of triage managed. But then number two, I thought, oh my gosh, is this coming for me in like 15 years? And so this is where I really shifted my focus, not only in women's hormone health or like really optimizing perimenopause and menopause, but really helping to support women, not only from a lifestyle perspective, but also from really understanding what's going on with their body. So from an educational perspective. And that's when everything shifted for me in the work that I do in the world. And that was about 17 years ago.
Nice. Yeah. I think I always find it, people who really seem to, I mean, I'm just using online as an example because I'm sure there's many passionate, good practitioners out there that are doing things day to day. And there's probably others, just like any other industry, that maybe are just, average. Maybe they're not quite, but I always find the ones that really are like the outliers. They just have a story. They have more, why behind their what, a little more passion, right? Because we all been there. We've all been in that job. That's like, yeah, it's okay, but it just seems like, especially, what's that?
Like a job is a job.
Yeah, exactly. It's where this is more, when you're getting into these things, you're helping family members, you're helping people, and you're seeing those results, and it seems to be never ending. So, because you mentioned that was 17 years ago, you said?
17 years ago.
I'm curious, like, from your perspective, because one of the questions or conversation I want to get into a little bit is kind of the current state, but I'd like to work our way into that as far as women's health. I mean, we know, if you go back as far as, I think it was in 77 is when the FDA finally allowed women to be involved in studies. And there was some time in.
That's when we took them away.
That's when you took them out? That's when we took them out.
It was 77 when we took them out. Any woman of childbearing age, out. And then it was 1993 where, yes. So, yeah.
I had them mixed up.
77 to 93. There was a lot of studies. I remember being in college in 2002 or 98 to 2002. health psychology and biochemistry. And all of the studies we were looking at, particularly psychology studies and health psychology, so stress, resilience, and sleep issue. I mean, all of it was men. It was mostly college men. I was like, do we study women like ever?
No, and I was, because I have a couple of notes here too, because I've found this really interesting. Like, it is a little bit predating that. They're talking about the NIH funded trials using healthy male medical students as stand-ins for women in some of these studies.
It's almost laughable, Joe. I swear it is almost laughable, and it has set us back so far.
Yeah, you're right. 1993. I'm sorry to cut you off. Yeah,
No worries.
I was just looking at, just double checking my notes because it threw me off. And then you have the Women's Health Initiative, slightly after that, and what changed with that. So I just wanted to kind of hear from your expertise view, the women's health space, if you will, medical primarily, but if there's anything even anecdotal from a health or fitness standpoint or whatever the case may be, like where it was, maybe you can walk the viewer through where it was from your point of view, and then kind of where it is today, and then maybe like where you think it's going. Is it going in the right direction? Is there concern with the direction? I don't know. Just kind of want to get your input on it.
It's such a great question. I mean, I think we all know that our medical system was built on male physiology. And for a long time, it really was that women were small men.
Right.
Or it was one of two arguments. I'm like, you can't have both. It was either we're too complicated to study, or we're just like small men, so we're not worth studying. It was always one or the other. The pendulum was constantly swinging. In 1977, it was mandated that women of reproductive age, even if they didn't want children, would not be studied because it was too complicated and we weren't too different. It was like a yes and. But then we realized there was a bit of collective outrage by 1993 that half of the population was not being studied in terms of diagnostics, in terms of medication, pharmacology, just across the board, and that shifted. However, if you take a look, even up until like the last few years, from 1993 to now, not a lot has really shifted. I mean, we are starting to see bigger shifts. I mean, we're starting to see a bigger demand. Obviously, I think social media has played a big role in that. Right. Medical providers across the board, especially big female influencers, are really moving the tide. So I think because of the collective outrage and the collective need, we are beginning to start to see that shift. But yes, we had a landmark study back in 1996, 1998, the Women's Health Initiative, the biggest of its kind, because we, at the time in the 90s, hormone replacement therapy, it was conjugated equine estrogen, and then usually some type of progestin, was the number one prescribed medication to women in the country. And so and doctors anecdotally saw that there were heart benefits, there were, bone benefits, there were neurological benefits. There was a lot of benefits they saw in their practice, in clinical practice. And so we wanted to see, how did HRT have an effect on cardiovascular health in terms of long-term health outcomes, and also if it had any profound impact on cancer. So as you know, how that all shuffled out is in 2002, the estrogen arm was shut down due to what they considered relative risk of breast cancer. So, and it really actually wasn't the estrogen arm, it was the estrogen and progestin arm that was the issue, but it was, instead of 4 cases out of 1,000 with breast cancer, it was 5 cases out of 1,000 with breast cancer. And then when we look at the 20-year review or 22-year review at this point, we now know that the estrogen arm, in its own right, the conjugated equine estrogen arm, had a decrease in all-cause mortality by 23%, had a decrease in osteoporosis by 30+%. We saw a cardiovascular protection, not necessarily any neuroprotection. We weren't really looking at that per se. And then when we look at the progestin arm as well, we also saw that there really wasn't a significant risk at all. And so that is where we've landed. I know that the research has just been re-reviewed this year in 2026. And ultimately, that what we were claiming in 2002, what the media kind of blew up as HRT causes cancer, has all been debunked.
Yeah, even so much so that the FDA removed like the black box warning as well, which is,
and have shifted.
Yeah, so that was that. I think that's a good sign, I guess I would say, and kind of a couple other things there I'd like to get your input on in a moment. But I was wondering if we could back up for a minute too. Can you explain progestin versus like, you know, like a more, whatever you want to term it as, bioidentical progesterone type versus like different types of estradiol versus estrogen? Like, can you just, for the audience out there, explain maybe some of the differences in what was used in the study and then what some use more in the compounding world? Or, you know, yeah, like what differences are there? What different options are there?
Yeah, it's a great question, because today we still have synthetic options. Conjugated equine estrogen is still available. Premarin, we know that Prempro is still available. Again, not necessarily being used that often today. What was being used was MPA, a progestin, but basically a progestin, its way we can patent it is a synthetic version of progesterone. And so the bioidentical version of progesterone is what we'll see in Prometrium today. Or if it's being compounded, there's a lot of different, we can get extended release in terms of compounded, lots of different options when it comes to compounded progesterone. But when it comes, I always think about things in terms of accessibility. Prometrium is pretty standard, over the counter, easy to get your hands on, pretty inexpensive, efficacious. I mean, obviously, when it comes to progesterone, there's a little bit of nuance when women are utilizing it. And so everyone's going to be a little bit different in terms of how they respond to it. But the progestin is always going to be a synthetic version. So in terms of it binding to the receptor sites of those receptor sites on cells that bind to progesterone, we know that when it comes to progestin, they can often bind potentially to testosterone type receptor sites, that they can kind of garble the communication a little bit. And so we do see some kind of, again, every woman's a little bit different when it comes to it. Some women can tolerate a progestin, other women cannot. I am one of those women that cannot tolerate a progestin. The mixed wires, the cross wires, it gets real messy very quickly for me. And so it's always my recommendation that we lean towards a bioidentical progesterone. I'm a big fan of the real thing versus the synthetic version of it. And so that's always going to be my recommendation moving forward. And if that doesn't work, then we can, any provider can try a progestin instead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that insight. And I think I would like to selfishly / for the audience, I guess. So I kind of want to too, but kind of unpack it a little bit, just another layer further. Cause I think sometimes, even as in tune as women are with their bodies, sometimes we start talking about these terms, maybe it's like, man, I don't remember, maybe that was like junior high, like biology class. Like, I don't remember talking about this. Right. But like, can you talk about the importance of the balance, if you will, that's going on in a woman's body between estrogen and progesterone, and why you kind of need both, and what maybe one would feel if they didn't have, say, enough progesterone or a positive response to progesterone versus estrogen? I'm just kind of curious to what that would, for the group to hear, what that would sound like or look like, I should say.
You want me to, so a couple different directions I can go with this. So I'm curious where you would love. I can kind of break down the cycle and talk about kind of rhythmically how this is all working.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break down. I know that, the book is on perimenopause, but I'm in perimenopause and I'm still cycling. So I've got estrogen and progesterone very much on the scene still, getting a little wonky, but they're still showing up to the party to some degree. So let's break down let's start at menstruation. Let's start at the follicular phase. So we're looking at, particularly in the childbearing years, it's going to be estradiol, known as E2. That's kind of the most proliferative. And this is going to be the estrogen that we see being prescribed and recommended when it comes to bioidentical estradiol. It's going to be the most heart protective, the most brain protective. It's going to be kind of the neuromodulator. It's doing a lot of work, from collagen to gut health to everything in between. This is very much a power hormone for women. So estrogen is on the rise. Usually I would say day 2, day 3, day 5, we start to see estrogen increase. The purpose of estrogen in this cycle is really to prepare the follicular cycle, which is to prepare the egg for ovulation. What will end up happening is, as estrogen begins to rise, the luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, which are pituitary hormones, also play a role in here. We get that estradiol peak around day 11, day 12. And I always jokingly say that everybody wants day 11, day 12 us, including us. That was always my favorite. That's always my favorite day of the month. Because that's when women are really flushed with estrogen, and that estradiol peak. And we're talking about kind of the highest level of estrogen we'll see in the body at any given time in the cycle. That's going to trigger luteinizing hormone to then get that egg to release, or, and it's very variable, but let's just say the first half of the cycle is about 14 days, ovulation on day 14. As ovulation happens, estrogen begins to decline. But we also know with that estradiol peak, there's a lot more other things that are going on. We are turning on genes in that experience. We have a bit of testosterone at that time as well. There's a lot of things that are moving in our favor, kind of in a positive direction. Also, this is really helping to trigger not only that ovulation, but that we're priming up progesterone. So with ovulation, we have this temporary endocrine structure called the corpus luteum. And that is where progesterone is going to be released on the back end of ovulation. When it comes to the menstrual cycle, AKA the ovulatory cycle, ovulation really is the main event. That is the whole purpose of us, in terms of evolutionary standpoint, in terms of our biological initiative, is for us to continue to make other humans and move it along. And so the fact that we call it a menstrual cycle, and we kind of work our way back from a period, is a little bit backwards to me. Then progesterone is on the rise. And the reason why progesterone is on the rise is that every month in the human body, we are going to just assume that you got pregnant. That's the name of the game. And progesterone is a progestation hormone. We also know that progesterone is priming receptor sites for estrogen to show up in the follicular phase of that next cycle. So around halfway through your luteal phase, it's called the luteal phase, where progesterone shows up and the body's kind of figuring out, did she get pregnant? Not. Did she? No, yes or no? Yes or no? Around halfway through, typically, let's just say day 21, is when, and we do have a little bit of an estradiol peak, but again, the difference between estrogen and progesterone here is like 100 to 1. It's a massive progesterone increase in peak, and it's like, a little bit of estrogen in this part of the cycle as well. Once the body figures out that there was an implantation, then we start to shed that endometrium. Hormones begin to decline. It's that late luteal phase where, as hormones are declining and uncoupling from receptor sites, and again, we're prepping for menstruation. These are often when we'll see perimenopause symptoms for sure, but PMS symptoms, where more mood changes, kind of a mini neuroendocrine transition in its own right, more cravings. Women tend to go more inward. A lot of different symptoms can happen here. More bloating due to and more pain due to prostaglandins. So there's a lot of things going on, but ultimately we're getting back to kind of ground zero, where hormones are back down and we restart the cycle all over again. But these hormones have a very symbiotic relationship at all times. In a lot of ways, it's a very beautiful orchestra, to drive what I consider to be one of the most critically important processes of the body.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I was curious too, because for people out there, maybe there's a couple different ways to ask this question for different people listening in, but one would be, you mentioned like progestin didn't really sit well with you, or your body didn't jive with it as well. Like, what if someone's on a progestin or progesterone replacement, what are some possible symptoms they might have if it's not going so well, or their dosing's off, or whatever the reason? I'm just curious to what led you to have that feeling. And then when you're working with other patients, like, what are some things to look for on the progesterone side of things?
Yeah, I mean, as I shared earlier, it's a synthetic compound that's designed to mimic progesterone, but again, it's not fully fitting exactly in that lock and key. And this is where even hormonal IUDs, it's a progestin-based IUD, the mini pill, birth control pills, whether that's a combination, those are all going to be progestin-based. And what often women experience, for me, it was mood changes, it was breast tenderness, it was bloating, it was weight gain, it was it really was the neuroendocrine transition for me. Like I had, my brain was foggy. I started getting migraines again. So it was I would say a cacophony of changes, but really it felt like my brain was a bit on fire. So that was, and then also we find that it's not necessarily as favorable in terms of metabolic changes. And so, a stat that a lot of people don't know is that 50% of women who start hormonal birth control, because that's often where we'll see the synthetic hormones come into play. There's really not a hormonal birth control that doesn't have synthetic hormones in it. But 50% of women will get off of hormonal birth control within the first year due to side effects.
Yeah. I'm curious that I've never really looked into it. But now that you say that, has there ever, I should maybe know more than I know about this, but I'm curious, has there ever been an attempt, or is there a reason why their birth control is not in, like, they can't use a bioidentical form, or just have to do with patents and kind of did I answer my own question?
Yeah, exactly that. Can't make money on, so yeah, it has to do with patents. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I got a couple other questions. I don't want to jump to yet because I want to stay on this topic, but I see that a lot, to where people are like, well, why is this not approved yet? I'm like, well, because there's no money to fund the approval trials for said peptide or whatever, because it's naturally occurring in the body and you can't patent it. So once they figure that out, you better best believe that there's going to be all of a sudden, FDA trials and all that. But anyways, going back to progesterone, as far as like when someone potentially, let me take a step back. So we talked through perimenopause, I guess. What is generally the first hormones you see start to deplete? And I know we're painting with a broad brush here, but just with most women as they're transitioning that midlife phase, as much as many don't like me to use that term because I've been scolded a few times by our friends if I bring that up. Well, you might be going through this. They're like, don't say that, Joe. I'm like, sorry, but
I think we're getting more comfortable with it.
I think it's more teasing at this point.
It is an inevitability.
Yeah.
And,
no, some of we have friends ranging between the late 30s to early 50s, kind of in that range, where they're asking questions about things that are going on, and I'm if I say it to the lower end of that, they're like, I don't really want to accept that. But it's more laughing. But my question was, like, what are some of the hormones, I guess, that one may feel start to experience being lower, and then what does that feel like? So if someone's listening and they're like, oh, I wonder if that's me, like, I'm just curious to what have you seen, as a clinician?
Yeah, I love this question because this is often where women are told they're too young, or it's easy for even ourselves to say, oh, this is something else. It's easy for us to dismiss ourselves. Right. As remember I told you when I was growing up before we got started, is that it was like, you just have to tolerate being a woman, and you have to tolerate this monthly cycle. And and then it was also, as an immigrant, coming from an immigrant family, it was like, you need to push through no matter the cost. It was kind of the thing. So it was shut it down. Like, even if your body's screaming at you, just keep going, and this is what had happened to my mom. My mom had been in perimenopause for years before she was 48 years old. She just kept brushing it off. So this is what I see in late reproductive years. We talked about, we have this foundation of breaking down the cycle, which is so lovely. Again, ovulation is the main event. We know that progesterone is the progestation hormone. It's on the back end of ovulation. We also know that in the late reproductive years, which is often around the mid 30s to late 30s, at the end of the day, it's really around how many eggs do you have left. And if at puberty, we only have, well, it's not only, but we have 300 to 500,000 eggs. And we start cycling through those eggs every single month rhythmically. And again, it's not just the one egg that gets chosen. We prep a bunch of eggs, every single cycle. So by the time we're in our mid to late 30s, we have thousands of eggs left at this point. And it can vary, I would say, let's just give a number of like 10,000 eggs. At this point, we're going to start having an ovulatory cycle. So cycles where we don't actually ovulate. And that's going to progressively continue as we move into our 40s. And obviously we get to menopause, where we have maybe 1,000 or so eggs left. But at that point, ovarian senescence has happened. In that late reproductive time, due to anovulatory cycles, or maybe ovulation just isn't as robust as it used to be, we will not have the same amount of progesterone on the back end. And so what women will notice in kind of late reproductive, but also early perimenopause, and again, it's kind of blurry. There's no defining moment, Joe, where you go from, regular cycling years into perimenopause. It shifts for every woman. For some, it's very subtle and it happens over the course of many years. For others, it feels like a fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
And so it can really range, and it really depends on how you were living, or maybe your genetics, or how your mama went through it. There's a lot of things that kind of play into what that experience is going to be like. But progesterone is going to be the first hormone to drop in the majority of cases. And what it's going to feel like, because it shows up on, again, in the luteal phase of your cycle, you will notice symptoms in that luteal phase. And really what it'll be is more amplified symptoms. So women will notice more stress intolerance. They will notice more sleep issues. And the thing is, what makes it a little bit tricky is it can really be a moving target. For 3 months, everything's fine. And then that 4th month, it all just kind of hits again. And so I would say classically starting to see sleep issues, stress intolerance, a little bit of low mental energy, in terms of not feeling as sharp, PMS symptoms. Maybe you also notice more bloating, more cravings, more reactiveness, more irritability, maybe some menstrual cycle changes. But in this time, if you're not tracking your menstrual cycle, which I always say it's your monthly report card, you probably aren't going to notice that, you went back a couple days, or you went forward a couple days. That's the ebbs and flows of a normal menstrual cycle to begin with. But you may also notice that, what used to be 3 days of PMS symptoms is now 4, 5, 6, 7. It starts to stretch. And so that's usually what we're noticing in the beginning. A lot of it, that I was looking at Dr. Louise Newsom's work recently. She's got an app where she's got a lot of data on women, particularly in the UK, but all over the world. And she had just posted, and this has been what I've noticed in my clinical experience, that the number one symptom of the perimenopause and menopause transition is brain fog, is low mental energy. And when my patients talk to me about low energy, it's always that mental energy. They just don't have the same bandwidth that they used to handle things. And they find that they are having to effort harder than ever before, when things used to feel so much easier to them. So that mental load.
I'm curious on that note, actually, what, like, the mindset of women when they're talking to you, because I'm just observationally, from my point of view, being in my mid 40s, say the last 10 years, just friends, family members that are women. And a lot of them seem to, well, little Johnny and Susie are older now and they're getting busier, so that's why I'm tired. Or, well, they're playing, travel sports now, so that's why I have a hard time concentrating. I just, and a lot of times it's
ourselves.
What's that?
I feel like it's a lot of gaslighting.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I was getting at, is like, really, like, because I feel like it's almost this weird, again, I'm a man, so it's observational, so feel free to correct me. I'm just sharing. It's just with this weird, like, I don't want to make excuses. This is just life. Like, I can't just accept the fact that maybe there's something changing. It's like, why not? Like, I recall last little anecdotal conversation I had with a family member, and she's like, Joe, you'd never believe me. I know this is going to sound bad. I'm like, no, it doesn't sound bad. Just talk. I'm like, it's fine. She's like, I'm so depressed. I can't even, like, go for a walk in the morning. And I know I'm lazy and I'm like, stop the negative self-talk. I'm like, I'm not a clinician. I'm not her doctor, but I'm like, I'm not diagnosing anything, but I'm just looking at her blood work. Like, your thyroid's trash. You have no hormones. Like, your blood, your insulin response is through the roof. Like, no wonder you feel like garbage. Like, you don't have the raw materials to do stuff. Therefore, you're not going to want to do stuff. That seems like a natural equation. You don't, again, this is not medical advice, but maybe you don't need an antidepressant. Like, maybe we just have to fix this and be a little easier on yourself, or give yourself some grace here, because you're kind of just now waking up to maybe this 6, 8, 10-year journey that got you to, her definition, not mine, but poor health of where she doesn't want to be. And how do we now turn this page and kind of lift up to it? So you kind of already commented on the gaslighting, but do you find that that's woven into our society with women, where they're kind of like, it's not okay to,
absolutely,
explore these other things? Like, I was wondering if you can share with the audience out there, and maybe someone's listening and it creates a little courage to kind of press into this more, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit it on the head. It's one of the most heartbreaking conversations I have is always the first health history. And how often women, a new patient will tell me before we get into the labs, before we really get into, what's going on, so many of my patients just need me to know that they're not lazy, that that it isn't for a lack of trying, that they don't know what's wrong with them. And, we often have been told, oh, again, kind of suffering is the default mode to some degree, but that it's all these other ancillary things that are going on. It's the raising the kids, it's not getting enough sleep. It's just a lot of beating ourselves up when we really are in a neuroendocrine transition. It's also the lack of education. It's a massive knowledge gap in terms of this transition in particular, and even menopause. When I ask women, particularly, women that are in their 60s, in their 70s, even in their late 50s, what were your menopause symptoms? Or do you remember going through menopause or perimenopause? And they're just like, no, I didn't have hot flashes and night sweats. I didn't have major sleep issues. And so I didn't really go through it. And I was like, isn't that so there's just a big knowledge gap in terms of what is the experience, that we have. And so this is really the biggest issue, is that we're not fully understanding what is happening with our bodies. Menopause and perimenopause is not just a reproductive transition. It is a metabolic transition. It's a cardiovascular transition. It's a gut microbiome transition. It is a brain transition. Everything is up for review. And when we start to really understand that, and we understand that earlier than we go through this transition, this is where we can really be looking at data in a meaningful way, whether it's biomarkers, whether it is heart rate variability, it's resting heart rate, it's sleep information, it's your menstrual cycle changes. We start looking at all of this in a more meaningful way, in a root cause way. It starts to all make sense. And then we can really bring in levers to help manage it. So it doesn't get to a point where we are metabolically busted. We do have a fasting insulin that's 10, or we have, a fasting glucose that's pre-diabetic, or we've got lipids massively out of range. We're now seeing increased risk for cardiovascular disease, or we've lost a lot of bone on our DEXA scan.
Right.
We shouldn't be waiting until all of these things are coming together. And this is why I talk about perimenopause, not menopause, as being that window of vulnerability.
Right.
Because this is where women are really experiencing a lot of the intense symptoms. And we're so quick to kind of just brush them off as like, oh, it's just hormone chaos, or, oh, it's just perimenopause. But what about the silent shifts? What about the bone loss that accelerated? What about your endothelial blood vessels that are becoming more inflamed? You're losing nitric oxide. What about the general urinary symptoms of menopause, where you're having more UTIs, and vaginal atrophy? Like, though that's not so silent. I think we know when that's happening. But also, what about the brain changes that are happening that put us at greater risk for Alzheimer's and dementia? And so I think it's really heartbreaking to see so often how women, we're just blaming ourselves. We think it's our fault, when this is a really profound transition. These hormones are far more critical than we ever gave them credit for.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I think we're all wired our ways, and, generally, I don't want to, like I said, overgeneralize, but women have a little more of that nurturing, caring kind of DNA, where men, have a little bit different focus, if you will, the way that, at least in my experiences, are hardwired.
That's how I feel about it.
What's that?
That's how I feel about it as a mom. I mean, I'm in perimenopause. I have a 5-year-old. He's a little he's beautiful little light being, and man, there are days where I am in it. Like, and I've got the hormones. I've got I'm focusing on cellular energy and healing my mitochondria. I'm working on my stress response system. I mean, mama is doing all the work to be the best mom I can be. And yet, like, I will always often sacrifice myself for the sake of him.
Right.
Like, I just can't change that biology. It is so hard. And it's, the whole, oxygen mask on first. I'm like, when it comes down to it, and we're on that plane, he's getting it first.
Right.
There's no way that I'm choosing me.
Right. Well, and I think, just from my experience, it's something I constantly try to do, at least in our household too. And, as men, is just to acknowledge it and try to support, I don't know how else to word it, but like try to like help your wife give herself permission to kind of, you know, take care of herself, or something. I'm not perfect, but I try to do is like, I've been finding it last year or so, like different ways, which, we've been married almost 16 years. So yeah, I just finally starting to get it where like the last year or two where it's like, all right, like I'm going to plan a day and just block her calendar now because I have access to her calendar. So I'm like, I'm blocking her. And she's like, what's this for? I'm like, don't worry about it. She doesn't like surprises, so I have to tell her. But still, helping through this process, knowing that, I don't mean it in a negative light, but like most women, because of their compassion and their heart for their families and those that they're helping, they're always going to put themselves last. So they need someone else to kind of help nudge them at, whether it's a coach or a spouse or family member, friend, but just to kind of help them also put themselves as a priority from time to time so they can be a better mother, wife, sister, daughter, etc. So
It's so true. I mean, it's hard. And I have a lot of women, that's mostly my practice. It's moms in midlife who are juggling their families and their household and their careers, and talk about superwoman energy to an nth degree. And, they're just like, I just can't. And so, a lot of what I'm, as much as, we've got these evidence-based protocols and guidelines, for example, like 150 minutes of moderate exercise every single week. And you look at, I have a patient who's maybe clocking close to 4,000 steps a day. Like, we're not getting to 150 minutes of moderate exercise. And so how do we make these micro shifts that we can fit into her very full life and busy day? And so that's a lot of what my protocols are about is, it's one thing to lay out, these are the things that I think would be amazing that you should do to get you back to a place of, of optimized, and like, it's not doable, not for her in her life. And so that's been kind of my, the kind of my, not, I wouldn't call it so much a challenge, but like, how do we fit this in? Like, how do I fit in exercise snacks? How do we fit in a morning routine? How do we fit in a little bit of breath work? How do we fit in more of an anti-inflammatory, diet? Just all these little things that kind of are micro shifts that move the biggest needle. It's really, I feel like I'm always kind of like playing detective and trying to figure out how to get all this in. But even for myself, like after this, I have a walking date with one of my best friends. I always feel like that is the ultimate longevity hack, is movement with your friends. I don't do cocktails with my friends. I don't do big dinners. I mean, not that there isn't anything wrong with a big dinner with your bestie or a bunch of friends, but with me and my girls, it's movement. It's a hike, it's a walk, it's a workout, it's a yoga class. It's always movement. That to me is the force multiplier. So yeah, it's just helping get these micro shifts in for women on a daily basis. I think that consistency is what moves the needle for so many people.
No, it's funny because just reminded me, I have my weekly vinyasa flow class tonight with my wife. So actually,
that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, because I'm so tight, and I had the bright idea in my 40s to get into jujitsu. So it's not going so well. So I have to work on my flexibility and mobility. So I actually started going. There's even one night where she's like, I can't make it. I'm like, I'm going, I'm out. And now, but it's kind of our routine. So I think you're spot on, because those are the things too that, like you said, friends, date night, like trying to, merge things together that are healthy practices. But oftentimes, what do we do, right? It's just kind of, let's go to the movies. We're sitting, probably getting snacks. Let's go to dinner. We're probably overeating. Like, now, again, you gotta live life too. I'm not saying that, but just take a look at, reflect on, how often am I doing these things? And can I maybe like swap one or two out, and I think when I was listening to you talk too, it sounds like you're meeting women where they are. And I find that a lot of really smart coaches sometimes, or people working with, clients are starting, they'll give them the benchmarks, but they got to give them permission to say, where are they at and how to work up to that. I had someone recently that was telling me they're working with a great coach. She's awesome. I know her very well. She said, well, she wants me to get like whatever it was, 130 grams protein a day. I'm like, okay, well, how many getting? She's like, I'm struggling to get 70, and like shame, right? And I'm like, well, why don't you just ask her, hey, can I get 80?
Job, okay.
Yeah, like, can I go from 70 to 80 for a week, and then can I go to 90 in 2-3 weeks? I'm like, I'm sure that she's like, oh, okay. So like, yeah, like you said, the 4,000 steps. Like, yeah, you can say, well, this study says, 12,000 steps and
Yeah,
you get this.
12,000. Like
Yeah,
now we have a massive gap.
yeah, she's like, yeah, great. I'm glad you told me that. I can barely get to 4,500. Like, can we start there? So, no, I think that's a really good point, though, is just helping people where they are. And it's, an old saying somewhere I picked it up where it's progress over perfection, where it's like, just move in that direction. Just start moving. Things will work out. Like, you'll find your stride and you'll get there. So,
well, and we've got so many, at least my patients are very much about that perfection. And that's, it's a lot of the overdoing,
yeah.
that we've got to walk back. And so it's, yeah, you got to meet your patients where they're at. We just don't see the level of progress we want to see if we don't.
Yeah, I want to take a minute and pop your book up on the screen. And for those who are listening on audio, we'll have this in the show notes. So if you guys, it's definitely what our team's going to be picking up and going through it. So really glad that you have it out there. But the Perimenopause Revolution. So for those listening on audio, we're kind of pulling up the webpage here for the book. Tons of great toolkits and benefits you have in here between a meal plan, and it's going to lead to a question. So that's why I want to kind of tee this up first. So like a meal plan, workout snacks, workout plan video series, symptom tracker, a lab guide built into this, other things for metabolic hacks, blood sugar friendly, ultimate morning self-care, early time restricted eating guides for perimenopause, and mindfulness ritual for easy stress and disruptive sleep. So a ton of value. If you do order it, wherever you get your books, Amazon, etc., then you can go to this page and put your receipt number and your info, and you'll get your free gifts here. So that's I really like when I see this, because I just did one on, was it Menopause in the Gut, a book by one of our guests, and we just like ate up all the content, even though a lot of us are doing this stuff every day. It was still just fantastic content, which was awesome to see. But I'm curious where I was going with my question and why I was setting this up is, what are some things, if someone's, right now they don't have a provider, they're not ready to jump into therapies or looking at their hormones, and they, probably should be on their list. But what are some like health things, like workout that's different for perimenopause, or some nutrition things you find? What are the things that you're kind of talking about in here and that could help women really thrive as they're kind of starting this journey?
Yeah. So the book is based on 7 pillars.
Okay.
The first pillar is really understanding and optimizing blood sugar regulation. I really want to get, insulin back to a place of sensitivity. We know that in perimenopause, we start moving towards more insulin resistance if we weren't already that way heading into perimenopause. And so a lot of it's going to be anchored in on how to build a plate with metabolically healthy foods. So protein, fiber, healthy fats. I give you tons of recipes, but also just how to put this food together. A lot of what Cynthia probably talked about, I talked a lot about probiotic rich foods and prebiotic rich foods in this book as well, so that we're really supporting the gut microbiome. I'm a big proponent of how are we boosting your cellular energy? How are we supporting and protecting your mitochondria? And I think food is one of the biggest levers that we can pull around optimizing our mitochondrial health and cellular energy, but through the proxy of really optimizing blood sugar. So one of the things that I talk about a lot, I'm sure you've heard a million times, but I think it's worth just reminding everyone, is moving after meals. Mm-hmm. Movement after meals. And it doesn't have to be a walk around the block. It can be jumping jacks. It can be jack squats. It can be mountain climbers. Often my son doesn't want to go for a walk after, he wants to build Legos. And so I'm usually doing jump squats and then Legos, jump squats and then Legos, jump squats and then Legos. And so you just get in where you fit in. I would love to do the walk outside and watch the sunset for my circadian rhythm, but it doesn't always work that way. And I want to spend that quality time with my son. And so building that plate, moving after meals, those are big ones. I talk about, there's a whole chapter on hormone replacement therapy. I know it's not the lifestyle lever, but I do kind of give the broad strokes of HRT and what to ask for and when to start that conversation. Movement. I'm a big fan of building your life around movement. So I think physical activity is the name of the game. Yes, I'm a big fan of strength training, but also I just want you to move. And so one of my favorite things to talk about is exercise snacks. I did 60 jump squats before our interview. I'm going to go and walk my stairs with weights after this interview. I'm going to go for a walk with my friend later on today. So it's just about how am I building movement into my day constantly, so that, that I'm not sedentary. Because at the end of the day, you and I both know we're both sitting here in our chairs, a big chunk of the day. And so how am I building in movement? Another area is really looking at connection, community, being a big lever for especially moving through midlife and beyond, and what that looks like to build community in this season. And then also managing and protecting our peace and calm. So how do we cultivate more peace and calm? I would say that the majority of the women that I work with have a deregulated nervous system. And, how do we address that? So I have a lot of strategies. So really just meeting women where they're at and some of the biggest kind of longevity pillars to build their health span. The whole intention of this is that this is the opportunity for us to future-proof our health in our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And I want women to have all of the tools in the toolbox to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great approach to it. I mean, a lot of, as you're mentioning earlier, there's all these general guidelines, recommendations, but I think it's important for people to look at, like I often will say, take the top 5 CDC health recommendations that we know 85% of Americans don't do. Let's start there. Cause they're like, I got the new, XYZ training program with this crazy diet and they're mailing stuff to my house. And it's like, okay, I'm glad you're doing that, but maybe we just start with like you just said, movement, little resistance training, let's just get some things rolling here. Cause sometimes I think we all can do it, men and women, but we can, maybe make it overcomplicated to get the ball, if you will, moving in the right direction. I did want to ask a follow-up though, just so someone's out there, like the episode, I might want to check out this book. Maybe not full ready.
Yeah.
Full ready to jump into the book. Like what do they get for this guide? Cause I think this is a really, really cool, perimenopause guide you have here. And just can you talk a little bit about what's included in this free survival guide for people?
Yeah, this guide is stacked. So it's a good place to start if you're not ready to get the book. This is going to have a symptom tracker as well. It's going to identify symptoms of perimenopause, or really understanding what is going on with your body. It is going to have a menstrual cycle tracker. So really a lot of the things that you can start looking at for yourself. It's going to have a full lab guide with optimal labs, so that if your doctor tells you that your labs are normal, you can double check and reference to make sure that you're kind of in that right place. And also it gives a full list of labs of biomarkers. I want to say it's probably 72, 75 biomarkers that I would be advocating for in your doctor's office, just to kind of get a full outlook of what is going on with your full body. Then it's going to have recipes. It's going to have a sleep protocol. It's going to have a movement protocol. So all of kind of what I consider to be the force multipliers to feeling like yourself again. So it's a great starting point. It's not the whole book by any means, but it will start you there, and at least in the state of awareness, and really how to advocate for yourself, because this is the transition that is so challenging to advocate. Like I just went and did my annual with my primary doctor, who's a good friend and colleague. And she's got her checklist. It's often a bikini medicine checklist. When was the last time we did your mammogram? And when's the next time you have a pap smear? And, okay, your colonoscopy, we're good till such and such days. It's very much cancer screening, but also bikini medicine cancer screening. And then she's got lists of labs. I've obviously got my list of labs. We kind of meet in the middle. I'll run more somewhere else. And so, it's important to be having the conversation. This is where I'm informing her where I'm at with my hormone replacement journey, and what's coming up for me, and I know where kind of the how far I can go in that visit.
Sure.
And then but also if we're paying for insurance in our own right, how far can I take that visit? And so, but I think advocating and really helping your provider meet you where you're at, to start having the conversation around hormone replacement therapy, to have the conversation around, are we looking at more advanced cardiovascular labs? Not waiting till we're in our 60s or our 50s, but I want to start looking at that right now. So those are the kind of conversations, that this guide helps you kind of move forward towards.
No, that's awesome. I couldn't agree more, because I think if you go to your general practitioner and they kind of give you the stiff arm and say, no, like we're not gonna have a conversation or whatever, you probably need to find a new one. But that being said, if you have that one that's having that conversation with you, a lot, like my experience has been great. Like they're like, oh, great. And they're pulling up their stuff, looking. I got some functional testing really in depth, found some things, the iron and ferritin that were off, which is weird. Kidney markers a little high. I'm like, what is going on here? So anyways, I met with him, and it just so happened I just didn't pull the labs again through our stuff. And he's like, oh, I wonder if it's hemochromatosis. Like, let's pull those, and we end up finding out I had one gene mutation for, I didn't have both, but just the one. So I didn't have to do therapeutic phlebotomy and had to change some dietary stuff, which shocked me. Anecdotally, like side note, I cooked like massive amount of meat in an iron skillet every day, like to prep my food. And I was like, yeah, I heard that before, but I kind of was like, I just never read up on it. I was like, does it really affect it? And just by dropping that, I'm not saying this will do it for everybody, but it lowered mine. And then I went back in, we figured that out, didn't have to do therapeutic phlebotomy. Anyways, it's a great conversation. And even he doesn't, there's no compounding pharmaceutical reps coming into his practice either. He gets other big pharma reps. But so I was even talking to him about different, time releases of different like medications that we're seeing. And he was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, let me look at, so it's just really good discussion. And I think if that practitioner's, flexible and inviting these conversations, this is a great resource, the guide to have women get, and then go and talk to that practitioner. But if the more informed you are to advocate for your health and to have these conversations, a good practitioner, I guess, regardless of the industry, but in this case, the medical field, is going to welcome that. And if they know their stuff, they're going to have they're going to elevate the conversation with you, right? Where if you go in there and you're like, I just feel off, that's good. You're admitting something, you're looking for help. I'm not saying that's not great, but the more info you can give them and the more you can have that conversation, I just find that people get better results, better outcomes, and they get the testing maybe that before the old, like, oh, you don't need that test. Okay, well, why? Can you give me a medical reason why I don't? Like, I'm just trying to understand. But if you can explain what's in this guide, then, hey, here's what I got, here's what the markers I want. Like a lot, they tend to be a little more apt to help try and get that covered, or, help you execute that test. Is this just some of my experience, but.
Yeah. And that's literally what the guide is designed to do, is print the page. Take the page with you. Yeah, I always come with notes into any appointment, because it's very easy to get off track, or to kind of feel like you're being interrogated in those appointments. And so all of a sudden you kind of lose where you're supposed to, what you want to be focusing on, what are the big things you want to cover in that meeting. And I always say, bring the papers. So the way that I created the guide was that it's that one page where it's kind of navigating women through that advocacy. You can print it and take it with you to your doctor. And at least you've got this piece of paper that you can keep referring to or referencing when you're moving through that conversation.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I wanted to hit a few bullet points because I know we're getting closer to time here, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I just wanted to hit a couple bullet points out there for maybe some actionable things for women. One of the posts you had that I found was pretty interesting. There's a lot of them, but one was on magnesium. Like, most people are taking the wrong magnesium. Here, I was to choose the right one for your body. I'm curious. I can share screen, or if you can maybe talk. Yeah, let me pull it up. So for those of you out there too, we'll have this in the show notes if you're listening on audio, but you can follow Dr. Mariza as well. And this was the post. See, I was just looking through a little bit more about different types of magnesium, and maybe if you can kind of walk us through, what they're used for and so on.
Yeah, let's walk it through. So my favorite, as a perimenopausal woman who really wants to get good sleep at night, is going to be magnesium glycinate. So we know that magnesium helps neurotransmitters like GABA promote relaxation and sleep. Also, it does 500 plus different things in the body. I mean, it is a super mineral. But the glycinate particularly is going to relax the body. It's going to calm the mind. I also love magnesium L-threonate as well, because it really relaxes, kind of just calms the brain. So, which, I always say, kind of figure out what works best for you. I find that most of my patients and most of the women that I've worked with, magnesium biglycinate, easy to get your hands on. It tends to calm things down without causing any type of digestive distress, which is, like magnesium oxide or magnesium citrate. But if I also have a lot of patients with constipation, mind you, we're getting to the root cause of what is going on there. But I always say, if you're not pooping every single day, you're not having a bowel movement every day, we're not fully detoxing the body. We're not moving everything out. So I do love magnesium citrate specifically for constipation. It is really absorbable, and it's basically pulling water into the intestines, so that it's easier to have that bowel movement. It acts as a natural laxative. Magnesium malate, I always think about for energy and muscle relaxation, especially sore muscles. So fatigue, muscle pain, and any type of neuromusculoskeletal pain that you may be dealing with. I think like malate can be really helpful, but also general energy production. So you may feel a little bit more energetic on a malate. And then magnesium oxide is also, I think, again, great for constipation. It acts as a laxative as well. It's not my favorite if it's like a big filler inside of a magnesium supplement, but let's say you get a magnesium glycinate and it has a little bit of magnesium oxide and you're constipated too. So it's a yes and, so you get the brain and the calming benefits while also getting a laxative benefit. And so I think it's really just figuring out what works best for you, but those are most of the magnesiums that I see on the market right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I was curious too, because I get asked this question, or I see this question online sometimes. Like if someone has constipation issues, let's say, and calm relaxation, are they better to find a blend per se to take like at night or whatever? Or do you often see like, we'll take citrate at this time and take glycinate or thionate, L-theanine, the magnesium thionate? Like, how do you we're talking broad here. I get there's
broad strokes, because it depends on how severe the constipation is,
Gotcha.
Also, often when we're using, like, let's say a higher dose magnesium citrate, let's say a gram, to kind of move things along, literally, often that can lead to, it can not feel super great, as it's working. And so I'm usually, even if I'm recommending magnesium specifically for constipation, I'm going to recommend it in the evening so that your body is working through that at night.
Got it.
But it'll be both. So I'll have, let's say it'll be like 350 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate, and then it'll be close to like 800 milligrams of magnesium. So it just depends on the person. I do have some women where, let's say, we're looking at, and I will say throughout the cycle, I will change dosage around magnesium. So towards late luteal, I will actually increase the dosage of magnesium, like magnesium glycinate, especially if, again, sleep is getting wonky. It was fine in the follicular phase, but in the late luteal phase, it's becoming more erratic. I will bring on board more magnesium, like up to a gram. If we're also dealing with constipation issues while we're figuring out what's going on there, I will still kind of meet in the middle of, maybe not a full gram of magnesium glycinate, but enough to make sure that the citrate's actually working. And we keep dosing up until we get to that place where women are having consistent bowel movements. And so it just depends on the patient, depends on what's going on. If we have no constipation issues, no gut issues, then usually I'm sticking around somewhere between 400 and 600 milligrams of magnesium biglycinate.
No, that's a great example, because I think what I hear there too is a lot of individualization, a lot of adjusting, not only the individual to the person, but individual to the time of the month, individual to how their body's responding. So I guess the message there too is A, find somebody, if you're listening, that thinks that way and that's their approach, and B, two-way communication. Because there's been, in my journey, and then even I know some clinicians I've worked with over the years where it's like crickets until it's like really bad, the side effects of the issues. And it's like, no, disengage, like feel that, we're reaching out for this info, like sharing it so that we can adjust. But you did mention one other thing I wanted to follow up on. So for constipation, one of the levers you're pulling there, it sounds like, is magnesium. Are there any other, like, I know it's kind of, depends on the situation, but is there any other like high return, if you will, or high impact levers you pull, have it be, increasing fill in the blank? Like, are there any things in conjunction with the magnesium, or is that usually like your first approach?
With constipation? First it's investigation.
Yeah. Okay.
We gotta do testing.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to be constipated while we're working through that and figuring that out.
Yeah.
So usually it's gonna be further testing to figure out what is going on.
Gotcha.
So that's always the first step.
Gotcha.
Before I start making protocols around gut health.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's,
Yeah, I mean, fiber is often low. I mean, that's always, but again, I'm not just, again, not a full, let's get you to 30 grams tomorrow. Like it's a
right.
titrated experience, kind of just like getting to that 7 to 10,000 steps.
Yeah. And my understanding is a lot of people have to like build up because they get a lot of gas, gust distension, uncomfortableness if they're taking in too much too quick. And yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate you jumping on. I mean, I probably could have you on for 3 hours because I had a whole hour of Dutch testing I want to get into that I didn't get to, but I still think there's a lot of really good information out there for people. Curious, just, we've covered a lot of ground, but want to see if there's any closing thoughts or, tips, words of encouragement, just kind of what are some things maybe we haven't covered or maybe you want to reiterate as we start to wind down here.
I think I always want women to know in this transition that can feel so destabilizing that it is that your body is calling in for a new level of support. I fully understand what it feels like when you're like, everything that I used to do that worked isn't working anymore. Like, what is going on? And it's just I always want women to know that they're not broken, that this isn't a personal failure. This is really a body calling in kind of new protocols and becoming very discerning. I always say leading from our values, getting clarity on our values and leading from there, building discernment from there is one of the best things that we can do. Probably boundaries are a big importance here. Prioritizing you probably for the first time is going to be a big one here. And really getting clear on your non-negotiables. And how I really walk women through that, or what are the things that you're doing daily that help you to feel more alive, that help you to feel more energized. And it could be like, oh, you're like, I noticed that when I put my phone away before bed and I go to bed earlier, maybe 30 minutes earlier, I actually wake up feeling a lot better. When I'm more consistent with my sleep, I'm noticing that I feel more rested in the morning. And so it's getting clarity on those, usually 3 to 4 non-negotiables. And we can start building those in and building consistency. We can really change the game and how you're feeling. I believe that how we're building health is through consistency every single day. And getting that clarity, I think, is one of the biggest things we can do in the menopause transition.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. And everybody will have links to her book, socials, so you can find her. Always reminder to do the like, subscribe, and comments. Just helps the episode and the show. But additionally, if you have any questions, send them our way. We'll be happy to connect you with Dr. Mariza and any answers or point in the direction of these great resources we talked about today if you have a hard time finding them. So thanks again so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And a lot of good nuggets that we're going to be able to share with women out there today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. We'll see you guys.